Craft, and I'm here today with a very interesting guest, Mr. Josh Walker, aka Halcoon. Welcome.
Hi there.
Now, you recently wrote a certain article which we posted on EFR's main page.
Mm-hmm.
And it was called On the Japanese Fandom, and it has actually taken off. Well, so could you tell the Brony community who you are and what you do?
All right. Well, first of all, what I am is I am an independent cross-cultural marketing consultant, That means what I do is I find companies that have a particular product and they try and market it, say like they're marketing it to another country. What I do is I kind of examine the product and I kind of look for its cultural suitability and see if there's anything we can tweak in it to make it sell better in someplace else. Because sometimes when you have a product, it doesn't really work so well in another country. My specialty is I work with American, Japanese type products where I will find like an American product that's being marketed to the Japanese, and I'll see if there's anything that can be done better, or if there's any Japanese products that are being marketed towards American or English base, and if there's anything that can be probably tweaked one way or another to better culturally capture the customers. That's what I do.
And how long have you been in this business?
I've been doing it since about 2007. I'm relatively new at it. I kind of made the job myself because I kind of graduated with a business degree, and it was one of those things that I sort of was really kind of interested in. But it's something that I actually like doing independently because it allows me to pick and choose my products and come in as a consultant, so they don't have to put me on a payroll or anything like that. I can just write up some paperwork for them, do a presentation for a company, and then see what happens. The thing about my job is because I'm not really kind of employed by any one company, they can kind of take my consultation and go, okay, that's cool, thank you, and completely ignore my advice, or they can use my ideas to help better their product. And, either way, I did something to help them out and hopefully get a paycheck in the end.
Well, so how did you get into this business specifically, and how did you get into working with cross-cultural marketing towards Japan in particular?
Well, one of the things is that I actually grew up in Japan. I was a military brat, and I was in Japan from 1987 to 1996 is actually my kind of span that I lived there. 87 was junior high school ages all the way up to 92 when I graduated. And then what happened was I joined the military and wound up coming back to the United States and then back to Japan again. And I did my military tour there. So I sort of stayed in country. And I when I was younger, I was like way a big fan of the Japanese cartoon, the anime, when it was like way primordial before it had a big impact here in the United States. And I kind of wanted to learn about this culture of, I used to go to cons and I used to not so much as enjoy the cartoons and such, but I wanted to see how the gears worked, how the business worked. And I found that inherently more interesting about how the companies produce their products and bring them to the United States. Subs versus dubs and all this other stuff. And that's how I kind of got interested in it. Was I used to live in Japan, and at the same time, I was interested in the anime product that was at the time being processed by Anime Ego and all the old companies trying to bring them to the United States.
So when you work now with cross-cultural marketing, are you working mostly with media marketing, or are you also working with specific products?
I deal mostly with just products. I really can't tell you who clients are, but I try and do products. And what I try and zero in on most of all are J-pop, even though it's used mostly for music terms in the US, but J-pop products, popular culture products. That's where I kind of zero in on. Anything from any company to choose from, or if there was like dream companies I would love to work for, Sony bringing over a video game from Japan to America, or Pocky or Meiji, who makes the Pocky product, and how to better market that towards the English Pocky eating demographic and that kind of thing. Things that are perceived as being trendy or cool by one culture and grabbing, in the popular culture, and then grabbing that and tooling it. Because if they tool it as just a standard product, it's not going to work in the other country. That's what happens. And so it's kind of cool to see this cool product being grabbed onto by a particular sub-demographic and then tooling it towards their tastes so that they are the ones being looked at. This is for you. And then producing the product for them. And then if it becomes a bigger thing, that's cool. But like I said, I'm just more of the marketing kind of a deal. Because marketing is communication. And it's just how to better communicate your product to your customer is really what it is.
Well, and so since you left Japan in 1996, of course, the internet has been on the rise. Would you say the majority of your marketing research now is online based?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. And it requires me to kind of hang out in different cultures and just kind of get a vein of what the flavor is there. so I can come up with, because I'm always looking for leads basically. And what I do is if I find some product that is interesting to me, or some product that is taking some sort of weird phenomenon form, I want to be there to kind of see what's going on, to add to my repertoire of ideas. And then maybe if I can see any relations, tweak it and come up with an idea to go to whoever runs the business and just send them an email or send them a PDF that says, hey, I've noticed that you're producing X product. I see that you're trying to market this product. You didn't see there was originally an email that I sent beforehand. And I actually wrote the president of the company and said, you have an awesome product. You are missing an entire demographic. And I think this is an awesome product. And I'm looking at saying, you have an awesome product. You have no idea what is out there. Let me show you. And I will give him this presentation. And a lot of times they will immediately come back and say, what can I do? I mean, this is kind of neat. And then I give them more of a idea of this is what's out there. And if you want more, here's an invoice. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
That's how the business kind of goes on that. One of the examples, a product that I've worked with, which are Vocaloids.
Well, so for members of our audience who don't know what Vocaloids are, maybe you could delve into that and explain what they were and how they became such a phenomenon.
Well, first of all, what Vocaloids are is they're a music synthesizer. In a nutshell, it's a synthesis product. It's a program that sings, that was created by Yamaha. And then they subcontract out to other companies to create the voices. In Japan, what they did was they subcontracted out to a company called Krypton, and they created a voice called Miku Hatsune. They did two before, but Miku was the very big one that was really, really popular with the fans. And what I've done in the past is I actually saw this Vocaloid phenomenon take off, watching the Japanese kind of clutch onto this Miku Hatsune character, which was just basically a box art and a voice. And they imbued it with all this personality and all these ideas, and the fan art and everything just took off. And Krypton wound up creating other Vocaloids kind of in the same vein, and they became wildly successful. What I had done was I actually had worked with a company out of Europe, and they were licensed by Yamaha to create an English Vocaloid. And there's like two companies that make English Vocaloids, and nobody in the Vocaloid fan base even knew they existed, even the Americans. Because what happened was the Vocaloid thing became so popular that even Americans or people in the West started actually liking this product and becoming fans of the art that was being produced with this product. And the companies in Europe that were actually generating the American version had no clue that this even was going on. And so that's where I stepped in and I said, hey, there's this really awesome product that you make. And there's this entire culture out there that you're not aware of, that if you tapped that, your sales would go through the roof if you could just market it in the right way. And I kind of gave examples to them, and they sort of took the ideas and as a consultant, and they kind of worked with it a little bit with me. And that's what happens. And that's basically what my job is too, is I take these ideas and say, this is what you got. If you change it, you can make it so much better if you do it like this.
So going off of your experiences working with Vocaloids and your experiences in the marketing field of cross-cultural marketing online, you happened to stumble across a certain show made out of Vancouver, didn't you?
Yeah, when I was looking online and I noticed the pony phenomenon kind of rumbling below, and I decided to go look into it. And it was a good show, but the fan base is what really caught my eye. And it was cool because I was kind of seeing the same phenomenon that I saw with the Vocaloids there, where it was just kind of a product, but what happened was the fans just immediately took that product and created this culture with it. And I thought it was kind of an interesting thing until I was reading the New York Times, and the president of the My Little Pony franchise had mentioned in passing that she had not seen anything like this in the 25 years that she worked with the My Little Pony franchise. That immediately struck a bell with me, because I was like, no, this happens. I don't want to say all the time, but I've seen this happen twice before. And I've seen this where you had this product and it immediately took this amazing fan base and became sort of self-feeding. You make this quality product, fans take the product, they run with it, and then they build this culture around this product, and it feeds into their productions, feed into the fan base again, and they create this ecosystem of art and music and such like this. And I've seen this before, exactly with the Toho thing, when it was just like some sublicensed product. And also I saw it one more time with the product I wasn't involved with, which was called Toho. Toho is a video game. It's a curtain shooter game, shoot 'em up, with cute little girls at the bottom of the screen. You shoot through amazing arrays of bullets and such. And I know the Toho fans out there are probably going to immediately disagree with me, but you have to kind of think about it. The Toho phenomenon is exactly the same way. They have these characters, these incidental characters from the video game. The video game itself is written better than it should be, for a shoot 'em up. But a lot of people just grabbed onto these characters and this world that they inhabit, and this fan base has grown around that as well. And so with both Vocaloids and Toho, I'm seeing this again. And I was explaining, the My Little Pony thing seems like our Vocaloids. It seems like that's our Toho. It's our ability to kind of show the world what kind of art and music a fan base can do. And that's when I got really interested in it.
Well, and I thought that was one of the more interesting aspects when you first contacted EFR about talking about your perspective from a marketing perspective. That was one of the things that struck me, was when you said you had seen this sort of phenomenon before, because I think a lot of Americans haven't seen that kind of phenomenon, but it seems like out east in Japan, it has happened, like you said, with Vocaloids and with Toho. And I had a question for you going off of that. It seems to me that what your job effectively is a form of cultural anthropology, isn't it? You're looking for burgeoning cultures.
Yeah, kind of. I have to be careful because I don't want to sound too callous about it. But when you talk about marketing and business decisions and money and things like that, it sort of takes away the romance of the product. And my job is to try and make it so you guys want to experience the romance of the product. So if I kind of dive in the market speech or anything like that, you have to excuse me.
Well, it's the nature of your business. I think that's just how it is.
Yeah, and I was going to think about using the word exploit. That's the word that you would use internally. As in, you can find a market and you want to exploit that market in order to sell more of your product. And I've known in the past where other marketing people have used it was actually in the video game realm, where there was a marketing person who used the word exploit. I think it was Activision, and they were talking about their fan base and how they could better exploit their fan base. And they did this in a PR release. And it's like, no, you don't use that word. You know what I mean? But you have to better, and that's why I want to better communicate, because it's about communication. You want to be able to communicate your product, what makes it awesome, to your fan base, and then hopefully have a reciprocation of them in the way of either buying your product or saying awesome things about it, grassroots ways, so that you can, sell more product, I guess is the idea behind it.
Well, yeah, and I think that a lot of the fans who are listening in right now are all thinking what I'm thinking, which is what you've been describing in terms of reaching companies that haven't seen how to best address these new, unexpected markets. It sounds exactly what needs to be going on, say, with Hasbro, with My Little Pony and the Brony community.
Now, I can't fault Hasbro, and keep in mind, like I said, I am not an employee of Hasbro. I'm an independent marketing consultant. So anything that I say here is going to be my own opinion on this. But having worked with big companies in the past, right now I'm contracted with a mutual fund company. That sounds really entertaining, but it has its bright times sometimes. And you have to understand that when you work with corporate in any circumstance, I use corporate kind of for a Hasbro corporate or my mutual fund corporate. When you work with corporate, there are a lot of things going on that are not related to the customer. They're out to make a product, but there can be a break in communication, and that's just how corporate culture works. When you have a brand new product idea, it's not like some guy has a really cool idea and then he just puts it in the magic machine and pulls the lever, and next thing out comes 3 million little plastic ponies. You have to come up with an idea, and you have to line it in the way of what is my return on investment on this particular product if we create this, and then you have to give it to your manager, and your manager takes the idea and then tweaks it and then gives it to the director, and the director has to go to the board of directors and sell the product to them so that the board of directors can now crack the money out, because it's not their money, it's the shareholders' money, and they have to look out for them. So, you just can't create a product out of thin air that you think might be cool. There's a lot of communication back and forth and a hierarchical type way of doing it. And the customer at the end, they're kind of the end all be all of everything, but they're sort of not the one in the communication loop. And so that's why things seem to happen really slowly. Or when you see this entertaining thing where something explodes and it took like a year for a company to turn its head to go, hey, what's going on here? That's just the nature of how things are. In Japan, what I think is kind of interesting is that it probably happens faster because the population for a country is much smaller. And so you have a faster communication because there's not so many people to kind of communicate this. And also Japanese tend to be a little bit more in touch with their own culture when it comes to communication. Then there's many different cultures in the United States. And there's a bit of a communication breakdown when it comes between the customer and the company.
Well, and so I guess what I'd ask you then, given what you've seen with both Toho and the Vocaloids, and then what you've seen so far with My Little Pony, what do you believe causes these unexpected markets to rise up? What do you think is that magic ingredient that has worked to their advantages?
I actually was thinking real hard about this. And now that I've seen three products do exactly the same thing, what can I tie together between the three of them? And one of the big things that has really struck a difference is the internet. The immediate feedback that comes from not only the feedback between the customer and the company, but the customers with everybody else. And also, I've also seen it that there's also a good deal of autonomy in each one of these as well. Hasbro made, was it DM, I want to say DHX or DMX. I know one of them is a rap star.
Oh, no, I think you're talking about how Hasbro licensed DHX to animate the show.
Yeah, and DHX is kind of its own entity. They were sort of left alone to do their thing. And there's not very many people in that company. And so they have like they read Equestria Daily in their offices. I've seen the pictures of it. So I know they're in the loop, you know? And when I watch the Vocaloid things, I know Krypton, when they release their Vocaloids, they're in the loop. They see what being produced by their product. They fold that back in. They look at what the fans are doing with the product. And when they created their own characters, when the fans started making their own characters, which is really cool, they will actually, you know, not making their own Vocaloid, but just making their own character for that product. I've seen Krypton take those characters and fold them back into the product. So there's this reciprocation back and forth between what the fans are doing, what the company's doing. It's no longer a one-way communication where this is your product, how good did we do? Well, let's look at the balance sheets. There's more to that now. And now we can get better information faster using marketing buzzwords, you know, social marketing, blah, 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 which that's its own bag of worms right there. But there is that communication that's happening now. And also with Toho is actually done by one guy. His day job, quote unquote, is he works for Konami. But his Toho project that he's been doing forever, he does by himself. All one person. He makes the character designs. He does the music. He's not really that great of a drawer. The fan art in Toho far outstrip what he can do. And he does his own music, his own character designs, his own programming, and he produces them all by himself. And it is this one person or this small group of people interacting with this large fan base and having this reciprocation, which is causing these to work. And there is a problem nowadays where companies are trying to grip onto their intellectual property with white knuckles, not wanting to let it go. And they want desperately, you know, they have to control their product. And there's a lot, that's part of the corporate culture too. They have a product, and especially with intellectual property products, trademarks, copyrights, patents, things like that, they want to control that. They have to control that because IP is something you just can't give away. It's something that they have to protect. And, you know, letting it go and letting it be on the internet and letting it percolate and then seeing what happens with it is kind of the price. I want to say it's sort of a cost of doing business that goes against your return on investment, but you get so much more feedback and so much more feedback from the fans of what's going on and seeing what they can do with your product, more so than what some marketing guy down in the bowels of your company can do. You can see in real time what they're doing with your product. And if you can fold that back in and then release that, like in the example where DJ Pony comes onto the screen 4 seconds, and now this quarter, or I'm sorry, in the fall, they're going to be releasing a DJ Pony product. That wasn't some marketing guy going, you know, I have an 80% chance that this particular character might be good because it's pink. It's because they saw the fan reaction from this product, and now they can go ahead and modify their business model to target that particular market. And they have to be able to do a quick turnaround. And when you're a big company like Hasbro, a big international company that has many products, you know, Transformers, you know, Battleship, and My Little Pony, and they have to be able to reflectively act faster to be able to feed the fan base what they want.
Well, and you know, I was going to say, I personally, when I saw that toy announced, that to me was a sign that Hasbro was starting to get it, that bronies were a marketable demographic, because it's like you said, that character was only on screen for 4 seconds, and the people who reacted to it weren't 4-year-old girls. It was the brony community. And so that they would invest in creating that toy, whether or not it looks show accurate, 100% whatever, that told me as a fan that Hasbro was reacting to what I enjoyed. And I was going to say, it seems like what you're arguing, or that you are observing, and tell me if you disagree with this, is that you think that companies that are indirectly responsible for some of these online movements like the Brony movement, what they've done is they've delegated the development of the brands to autonomous groups. It seems like what you're saying is if you love something, let it go.
Yeah, and that's real dangerous. As someone who sees the other side of the fence, letting go of your IP, that's really scary. And especially there are certain types of IP, mainly trademarks, trademarks being, there's a lot of misconceptions because you have copyrights and trademarks. And copyrights means that when you make something, no one else can copy it. But you also have something called trademarks, and trademarks is the name of something. And this is the reason why we run into so many weird name problems with My Little Pony. Why Firefly couldn't get called Firefly, why they had the name of Rainbow Dash. Because when Firefly was first out back in the 80s, there was no Firefly show, and now there is. And you can make the case that trademark-wise, the Firefly of the show, with the spaceship and the Firefly show and My Little Pony are completely different shows. But the problem is that they're names of characters, and you can have a bit of a problem clearing that. And you can either spend a little money to see if you can get clearance, or kind of take the chance and see if you can snag that name without anybody noticing, or just rename the character. And it's hard because with trademarks, if you don't use a trademark, you lose it. And that's different than copyright. Copyright is like if you make something in copyright, they make My Little Pony show, that's under copyright for life of the author plus 70 years. But when you do a trademark and you quit using that trademark for like 5 years and someone else picks up that trademark, you've lost it. It's gone. It's happened with it's happened with aspirin. It happened with, Kleenex, not so much, but Kleenex is one of those dangerous ones. You have to remember not to call it Kleenex, but you have to call it Kleenex brand facial tissue. Or one time I actually asked a company called Loctite, and what they do is they make a product that bolts into screw holes.
Yep.
And one of the things I asked them is we got into a debate once when I was working somewhere, and we were wondering, what is the past tense of Loctite? Do you say Loctightened or Loctightened or Lock? You don't know what it is. And so I decided to write them and see what it was. And what did they come back? You cannot use it as a verb. You must use it as fasten the fastener with Loctite brand thread sealant. That's the way they have to do it. You can't make a copy on a Xerox. You make a copy on a Xerox copy machine, because if they genericize the word, they've lost it. You can go to court and make that claim. And if you lose that trademark, you've lost your IP on that. So it's a really dangerous thing for a company to let go of its IP like that, because they run a risk of losing it. And it's the same analogy you said before. If you love it, let it go. But keep in mind, you do run that risk of it not coming back. And that is really scary.
Well, and then let me just ask a quick clarification for the audience here. What do you mean when you say IP? What does that stand for?
Oh, intellectual property.
Okay.
Yeah, intellectual property is a bubble that includes copyrights, trademarks, and patents. And it's basically, the idea is the ownership of thought, the idea of owning something in your head. And the problem is with intellectual property is once you say it, you lose it. So there's certain protections that were granted to us by the government that allows us exclusive monopoly on something that we write. We write a book, we can publish our book, and no one else can copy our book because it's ours. We make a product such as Nike. We have a swoosh on the Nike thing. That swoosh is ours, and no one else can use that in order to confuse the market. Those are protections that are given to us. And patents are, you invent something, you don't want anybody else to invent it because you were the one who first came up with it. And these are all protections that you can use to your advantage to help maximize the sellability of your product. But in this day and age with the internet, the IP is a very, very hot battlefield right now. And people are trying to figure out in this digital age how that's all going to work. That's about 40% of what my job is I actually have to keep that in consideration about intellectual property and stuff too, and how to balance that. And that's a real hard balance sometimes, especially for the company.
Yeah. You mentioned the example of Firefly with the show. Do you know of any other trademark issues? Because when you were mentioning that, the first name that came to mind for me was Applejack. I mean, Applejacks is a cereal that has, a widespread market base. How does Hasbro get away with it?
First of all, Applejack is actually a drink. It's a genericized drink it's an alcoholic cider. And that's just a generic term for an alcoholic cider, which I always thought was really kind of funny. But I can tell you one right now that everyone will just light up when you hear it. Bon Bon. Why do you think they've never given Bon Bon her own name? Because it's a candy.
Yep.
And so Lyra can see where they're kind of tentative about that one, because that one's kind of popular. But they kind of gave her a last name, and that was able to get it to fly. But Bonbon, I can pose its own special products because, you can go out to the store and buy bonbons, and that causes market confusion, and that's what they're trying to avoid.
You see them using the name in any regard, or do you think that they might do something like what they did with Trixie and with Lyra recently with the blind bags, where they named Lyra Heartstrings, and Trixie, I think it was Trixie Lulamoon?
I don't know, because I was doing some research into that just for fun. And from what I understand, Bonbon is genericized to a point, but it's one of those things where we can either not mention the character's name or rename the character, and it's less painful for everybody. So it's a path of least resistance. Sometimes in a company, you have to make that kind of a decision.
Did you notice any other examples like that throughout the show? Any kind of specific examples of where, maybe not naming, but certain elements of the show, say the train or the figurines or anything like that?
Oh, no. Well, the music, when Daniel Ingram has to take a song and sort of invert the scale in order to kind of make it sort of feel like the song, but it's not really the song, that's all clearance too.
Oh, you mean like the background music?
Yeah, like the background music. Like there's the quote unquote Benny Hill song when Twilight's being chased by all the pony citizens. And they had to kind of make a Benny Hill type chase song without it actually being Benny Hill, because that's owned by whoever has the rights to that, BBC or whoever. So that's another thing you kind of see at the same time too. You have to be kind of careful, because there's also protections afforded on the other side. You've got parody, which is perfectly okay, but it comes down to, do you want to get legal involved? And that's where you can start seeing, I can see people in corporate just rolling their eyes going, or Hasbro corporate, oh, let's just go ahead and be safe on this one, That's where, you can imagine that, when you have these collisions of IP and you have Hasbro having to sit there and make that decision, and it seems like a wimpy decision, but it's sometimes a decision they have to make.
Well, and I think you're talking about William Anderson, if you're talking about the background music. He's the composer for the background music, and actually EFR is going to be hopefully speaking to him within the next 2 weeks or so. But yeah, I definitely noticed that they did that in the recent episode that featured Iron Will, the background music that sounded almost identical to Eye of the Tiger, but wasn't. That they were clearly trying to reference that, but not copy it.
Yeah.
I think that's something that a lot of fans don't notice in the show.
Yeah, or they wonder why. There's gears behind the scenes of why that happens. It's kind of a drag, because it'd be kind of cool to have that kind of music in there. But right now, especially, music online or just music distribution in general is one of the big hot topics of big battlefields of IP on the internet nowadays. So you're not going to see much of a resolution in that. I mean, even when I did my Vocaloid paperwork, I had to explain about when you make music, and what made Vocaloids really kind of interesting was the fact that in Japan, they don't have fair use. They have JazzRack, and you think the RIA is bad. You know what I mean? Their rights company in Japan are way, way different. They have part ownership of the stages and places you sing. And if you're not a member of JazzRack, you don't have a music career. There are very few additions there. And when Vocaloids first came out and they had this problem with even voices being used and what kind of music can be done, it was somewhat of a disruptive technology. And there was even a lawsuit where JazzRack had a problem with they sold a ringtone and it was actually independently done. And so that's kind of folds back into that letting it go. You know what I mean? And because of that phenomenon, there's been more open music culture in Japan because of this. I've seen much more in the way of Japanese music being produced than I have before. That also might be the internet too, but it's just one of those interesting little byproducts of it.
Well, and so here's another question going off of not just trademark issues, but also really what you were talking about with the Vocaloid products and what was being done with Toho. I think the fan community is very much grounded in fan creation, in taking elements of the show, naming background ponies, creating fan tracks, making fan art. And I wanted to know what you thought about Hasbro ever bringing in those fan elements to the show. And I know that the one example everyone's going to cite is Derpy, who then, of course, was redacted for various reasons.
Yeah, that was unfortunate.
I agree. It was very unfortunate. But do you see Hasbro in the future maybe bringing in some of that fan-created content? Maybe not this season because of, short term, but in the future bringing in some of that fan content to really bolster their marketing.
I can see that. You still have to deal with the fact that there is that disconnect between DHX and Hasbro. The Derpy thing did not help. And like I said, that is more unfortunate in a lot of ways because they kind of got burned on that. And it was all innocent of what they tried to do. And what happened was their company kind of got burnt, and burnt was twice shy, you know? I think they're going to probably stay with what's safe. And as long as they don't have to get the lawyers involved, I think they're happy, because that's kind of the big dreaded thing they're all kind of worried about. Because one, you have to understand, there's a scenario too you can think of where, say, like you have a character or someone derives a character from My Little Pony, right? And it becomes a big fan favorite. And say like it's an OC, all right? And this OC becomes massively popular. And then Hasbro decides to incorporate that back into their line. Well, who is the right owner? Who owns the rights to that? Are they going to have to now get the lawyers out and negotiate licensing their own product? That gets a little goofy and a little weird for them. And that's difficult to deal with. I mean, that's a hypothetical.
Even people in DHX have said through their DeviantArts that the reason they don't include fan material is specifically because of what you just mentioned, that the ownership issue is so foggy.
I mean, even back when Doom was released, here's an interesting IP story. When Doom was released, way back when, the first-person shooter, then it wanted to release the file format for the levels, just so that other people can make their own custom levels in Doom, something that we take for granted nowadays, right? They had the lawyers they had to crack out the lawyers for that in order to clear the file format so that people could make their own custom levels.
Yeah.
It's something that is always lurking behind the scenes. And I've talked with IP lawyers and they're pretty good people, but they also have their clients they have to worry about. And so you start running in that weird murky water part that no one has really figured out yet. And that's where there's going to be a lot of learning in the future on that one.
Well, it seems that Hasbro is trying, in a sense, to encourage the fan community to do, even on a very base level, creative projects. I mean, through Facebook, they've issued a create your own pony creator. And of course, that's not to put them into the show, but it seems that they want to promote that kind of creativity and that kind of culture online. And so I guess my next question for you is, I know that when it comes to My Little Pony, especially with a company that's really a toy company, a lot of the ideas and a lot of the influences for the show are coming straight out of Hasbro's branding department. I mean, of course, DHX plays a major role in animating and voicing the show, but their branding department inserts certain elements to the show. Do you think that, given that fan-created material can draw so much excitement for the show, that they could have at any point a symbiotic relationship where, say, the branding department references fan-created material in order to build excitement and sales for their product?
Oh, you see, that would be cool, but I'm trying. The thing is that whenever I get hurt, whenever I have an idea that's postulated like that, I have to think about what can possibly go wrong with this. And it's really kind of a sad thing when you have this bright sunshine and rainbow idea, and you tell it to me, and the first thing I think of is fire and death. And when you start investing the fan idea, I mean, with Vocaloids, it was cool because the characters that were not canon, that were not part of the Vocaloid line, Haku and Akita, and I'm trying to think if there's anybody else, but those are the two big fan ones that got folded back into the little squid one too, that were fan creations that got folded back in. I don't know what kind of negotiations went on with that. I know it happened. And I don't know if some marketing person decided to approach the person who did the original art or what happened. But the problem is that they're going to have to secure it some way for just simple legal reasons. So can we keep the lawyers at bay while they do this? It'd be kind of nice. I can't speak. I'm not a lawyer, but it would be cool to see them sort of interact with the fans and having a throwback up on the screen again. Adventure Time, well, that was an animator that did it, but when Adventure Time did the gender swap episode, where that was a big fan reaction to that. So yeah, I've seen it, and that's another thing that I kind of noticed out of the corner of my eye, that Adventure Time is kind of doing this too, and we'll see how that goes. It's going to be crazy. Now that they've seen this phenomenon happen, you're going to see other companies try and duplicate it. I even postulate that with Lauren Faust doing her new thing with the DC IP, the Batgirl, Wonder Girl, and Supergirl.
Yep.
The thing that I've noticed, the PR, when they were doing the promos for it, they harped on individual creativity or letting the animator have free reign. I thought that was kind of interesting that they mentioned that in the product, in their video, that they're letting the animators pitch their ideas and then have full creative control over that. And we get a bouncy Batgirl, and we get a cool Supergirl, and a stoic, Wonder Girl, and that's something that is kind of neat to see released. Actually, if you were talking on the subject of what would I like to see in a perfect world, if I was Lauren Faust right now, who is probably so incredibly busy with their personal life and with her professional life, there's no possible way in any universes unless she cloned herself to do this. It would be cool to see her do a Kickstarter for Galaxy Girls and do a couple episodes. That would be amazing because I'm pretty sure she can get the funding, and I'm pretty sure because that'd be a one-on-one communication between the fan base and her. And that's how Toho pulls it off. But that's one guy. And that's difficult to do when you're running an animation series.
Well, it seems to me that what you're saying then is that companies, from at least the corporate perspective, are really looking for the simplest solution when it comes to marketing. And the simplest solution can mean either that they over-control and micromanage the brand in order to protect it or to maintain its integrity, or that they leave it and let it be autonomous. And it seems like it's two extremes, it seems to me. That there isn't so much of a middle ground. It almost is like if it's autonomous, if they try to micromanage it, as some companies have, that can cause a lot of upset. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I can see where that could be a real big problem. But we're still trying to figure out this middle ground here. It's really kind of a crazy time because you have all this IP stuff out on the table now, and nobody knows what to do with it. I mean, I try to provide as best answers I can, but I don't have all the answers. I'll give you the best shot. But it comes down to the fact that they're still a company. And they still have to market something and try and get a return on investment. You know, it's expensive to do things like this. And if they don't see more coming in than going out, it's not a viable product.
Yeah.
And if they lose control of their product and they can't pull it in anymore, it's not a viable product. I have seen companies take a stand where they would much rather see a product destroyed than have someone else use it. And I'm not actually going to name the company, but I've seen it where they produce a product, this product gets unlocked or opened, and the fan goes nuts with it, and they fight it to the point where they practically destroy it because they don't want to lose that control. And it's kind of, company corporate culture. It's kind of one hand doing one thing and the other hand not seeing what the other hand is doing kind of a deal. But it can be tenuous. There can be some problems with that.
Do you think that there's any example of where a company should micromanage in that regard? Or do you think that overall, say, finding a trusted person to delegate authority to, a trusted person or a trusted organization to delegate authority to for creating products. Like, for example, in the case of Pony, where Hasbro delegated really to DHX to create the show. Do you think that that's a superior model for producing a viral product? Or do you think that micromanaging, hyper-controlling companies can accomplish the same thing?
If the company could be the role of the mom, where you see it going off in a direction you don't want, no, come back here, kind of a deal. We can understand that. CCP, they're a company that makes the EVE Online. They wound up in a big mess with, I think it had to do with microtransactions, but I think it was before that, where they actually wound up having to make a fan board to run their ideas by, and they meet every year or some such. But I saw that happen too, because I can't remember what they did with the product. And I really want to say it was the introduction of microtransactions into it, but I'm not really too sure. But I remember something happened and everybody went bananas, and they wound up having to bring fan liaisons to their company in order to quell the fan base because something really bad happened. I don't have that information in front of me, but I remember that was a direction that a company took one time.
Well, so, okay, now looking at the broader scope of what you've done and what you've observed online, you recently wrote for EFR a very interesting article called On the Japanese Fandom, and it has drawn a lot of attention. And I wanted to know, how did you stumble across the Brony fandom? You mentioned earlier that you had heard rumblings about it, but how did you stumble across the Japanese Brony fandom?
Because I kind of always have one foot in one culture and one foot in the other, I kind of look to one and look to the other to see what happens. That's one of the things I think would be to try and keep me ahead if anything goes nuclear on the other side. And I looked at what was happening with the American fan base. And I really shouldn't say American because it's really a Canadian cartoon. But I was looking to see what was happening in the Western fan base. And I started following what was happening on the Japanese side. I remember back in 2channel when there wasn't even an MLP thread. And I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of like my barometer that maybe it hasn't really happened yet. And so when I was watching the Brony phenomenon grow, I was kind of looking at the Japanese side of things to see what was going to happen with that. Because I took under the same assumptions as I did in the article. And you've got this cartoon here with characters that are obviously derived from anime, with the way their expressiveness and the way their eyes are done. And I immediately, when I first saw it, I went through my paperwork and I found the Kimba the White Lion, the Japanese cartoon from 1965. And I'm like, this there is something here. It was a bad conclusion when I
Mhm.
first made at it, but I'm looking at the little anthropomorphic lion with the anime eyes, and I'm looking at My Little Pony, and I'm like, this could be something. So I filed that away. And then I started looking online, and I looked at, before there was a thread on 2channel, I was just sort of looking to see who would make a mention of this. And the first one I came across was the Remy Diary. The Remy Girls Diary, which actually, when I did that article, there's a comment in her website. I want to say her, it's whoever makes the website. But there was a comment in the website that noticed that I linked to them. And there was a comment in there, something to the effect of, someone wrote an article about you, but they said you're on My Little Pony page. And I just want to let you know that that's not a My Little Pony page. It's actually a Japanese page about American cartoons, and it's just that they happen to have 60 articles about My Little Pony in it, but they actually deal a wide gamut of American animation, the American cartoon product that's being done. So it's not a My Little Pony show, but there's things that because the person talks about bronies and derpy and all the phenomena that's going on there, I'll follow the links and I'll see where that kind of goes off to. And then I'll look at conversations they're having on 2channel, and I'll see conversations they have are eerily just like American ones. They'll talk about the pretty much same thing, Rarity need to be my wife, and weird stuff like that. And they will link, and I will follow the links and see where they go. A lot of them are, they're just interesting things on their perspective that they find interesting that I can now add to my little list of what I think might be applicable in the future. In a perfect world where I get hired by Hasbro and I help with getting the product to Takara Tomy, which would be awesome, which I'm not. Like I said, I'm not in running or anything like that. But I look to see what they do. And I mean, there was this one link. Here's an example, just an oddball link. There was a link that was on the 2channel page in the thread. It went to a YouTube video of Sweetie Belle voice cracking. And it was just a montage of Sweetie Belle talking and her voice cracking in mid-sentence, which is something that, if you watch the show, it's something that she does all the time. And it's really adorable. Japanese can't speak English, but they hear that voice crack. And for some reason, there was a Japanese person who was listening to this, thought this was a neat aesthetic to the character, and decided to link it to other people to show them what he had discovered. Little tiny things like that, little cultural weirdness, I think might be interesting, and I put it into my little file of stuff that I think might be interesting to bring up later or something to highlight later. In 2channel, they noticed I linked to them too, and they have a couple comments about me making the thing about the bathhouses, and I'm actually looking at the thread right now. They don't really have much in the ways of, they have spas there, but it's most definitely written by a woman, and she's talking about that I got it wrong. And I'm reading too much into multicolored ponies at a spa. And I might be. But then, 3 comments later, I've got some other Japanese guy who's possibly making a joke going, you mean they weren't ponies taking a bath? It's online discussion, so you take it with a grain of salt.
Well, and speaking of comments, the article that you wrote that we posted on our website attracted a lot of attention and actually raised over 30 comments in just one day about this fandom, because it seems that although some groups had already talked about Japanese bronies in the past, nobody had really put together any kind of list of links or any kind of insight into the Japanese fandom. So I have a couple of questions going off of what you had written for that article, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to answer them.
Sure, I'll try.
Well, my first question is this, and you touch on this in your article, but why do you feel that the Japanese brony community is so hidden from the rest of the community? Where was that separation coming from?
I think a lot of it just because it's so small. I mean, it's a really, really small culture. And it's not really even a brony culture like we've got it. It's more like they're watching us watch cartoons. Is really what the core is. And there are people who have gotten into it and they think that it's really awesome. But a lot of the fandom is just, they have noticed that there's this pony thing going on in the US and it's a curiosity about it. And they're trying to reflecting on that, but there are fans there too. I mean, but they're nowhere in the scale of what we've got. There's also the fact that we speak different languages and they're totally different languages. It's not something you can just browse by and all of a sudden it's like blah, 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 Fluttershy, blah, 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 blah. They're writing in a completely different letters. So it's not something you can kind of glance at. It's something you have to actively look for. And on top of that too, it's really hard to get an American show syndicated in Japan. And it's no different than how it is Here, I made this example in my article. It's the same thing about the U.S. though too. I mean, they have a perfectly good version of The Office in Britain they speak English, but we had to make our own. There was a perfectly good version of Three's Company. I think in France, it was in Britain. It was called something else, but they had to tweak it and rename it and make an American version of it. And it's just how they have to change the entire context of the product in order to make it more appropriate for them. The Powerpuff Girls Z is a really good example of that, where that was really popular. And I remember seeing pictures of websites that were fan bases, and I saw a picture of a girl holding her clothes out to dry, and she had Blossom. She just washed her Blossom doll, and it was pinned up on the clothesline. And, there's little things like that I thought was kind of cute, and there was so much of a fan base. They decided to make their own Japanese version of it, which wasn't really all that great, but they had a lot of powerhouse behind it. The character designer for the Powerpuff Girls Z cartoon was the same woman that made Sailor Moon, and a lot of people don't know that. So it's one of those things where they are trying to make some sort of cool thing to maybe expand the product, and it didn't really work too hot in that case, but they tried.
Well, and it seems like George Bernard Shaw had a famous quote: Britain and America are two countries separated by the same language. I'm paraphrasing. I know I've said it wrong. It seems almost like the West and Japan are two cultures separated by very different languages in that sense. When you mentioned the remakes of, say, The Office, it was kind of something that struck me when I was reading that article, which is that, they remade this show even though it was in English. It was in our language, but it still wasn't good enough for our audience.
On that subject, where the language is the same language separated by two countries, the thing is words. Even with Japanese fandom, for example, or American anime fandom, right? There are words that they use that are Japanese words that are not appropriate. One of my favorite ones, I have like a list of, because I read Japanese, and there's a list of Japanese words that Americans use that I really hate. And one of them is the word otaku. There's actually several. There's otaku, there's tsundere, there's two more of them. Shinigami is one of them, and I think nakamama. But the thing is that these are words that Americans tend to use because they think that there's no American translation for them. And as a translator, that drives me up the wall, because there are perfectly good English words for what they're trying to describe. But like in the subject of otaku, that's a terrible word. That is a terrible word. You never use that word in Japan. It's being said, like in the United States, it's seen as a way of self-identifying, which it used to be in Japan in the 80s. It was a way of self-identifying the culture. But in Japan, it's a really nasty word. It's something you call somebody when you really don't want to see him again. And I don't even really want to say the translation of it because it's just an icky word. But in the context, it's even gone even worse, because there was something that happened in Japan called the otaku killings, which was a very bad person did some very bad things. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You could probably look it up on Wikipedia. But that word has been pretty much shunned from their language. And you never, ever self-identify with that word there. And just other things like that, where they've taken these concepts and they've mutated them and changed them. And that's the nature of culture, though, too. Tsundere, the reason why I don't like that word is because it's often not translated, because they say there's no real Japanese, there's no English word for tsundere. If you don't know what that is, tsundere is a made-up word. It's not even a real word. It's a made-up word implying of tsun and dare dare. And it means someone who is obnoxious and someone who is quiet. And they put it together for people who are obnoxious on the outside, but inside have a heart of gold. And that's the concept that they try and communicate. But that's not what that means. The English word for tsundere is crabby. And I've been told this to people, and people are like, nope, you're wrong. I'm like, look, it is. It's someone who is nice, but is torn to temper tantrums. And I tell them, watch Haruhi again. And you know it's true. If you watch the way that she behaves, she's just crabby. And it's a cute way of saying it, but it's not like some sort of forsaken word. I think I'm going off on a tangent here, but that's how words can change.
Well, and I saw that one of the reactions to your article when it was posted on Equestria Daily was that a certain moderator of that website, who will not be named, described Trixie as a tsundere. He thought that was an appropriate term.
I thought that was cute. I sort of crossed my eyes at that too, because whenever I hear any of those words, and it's nothing wrong with it, it's just when you talk to professional, and I'm not a professional translator, I know enough that I can do my job. And the thing is that when I see other translators though, and there's a philosophy for translating that you have to be quiet. You're supposed to be in the background. You don't put any input into the story. Your job is to translate it into other things. And when I see them pop in Japanese words, you're not doing your job. And I have other translators who take that particular philosophy too. Anime fans are a little bit different though, because there's a certain expectation. And so it's forgivable in some sense when you watch some Japanese cartoon, they decide to put chan at the end of their names, even though it's not really something that's really appropriate to do in normal translating a literary novel, for example. You don't do that. But there's also certain expectations of translation too. One of the things, though, changing gears a little bit, you're talking about why that article was so popular. I noticed that the brony culture has its roots a lot of time in Japanese anime fandom. Some of them are not anime fans. I can understand that. I have to be careful to paint with a broad brush, but that kind of came about because I think that deep down, a lot of them have a part of the anime culture, have a kind of a knowledge of it. And so it would be something interesting for them. That's what kind of spawned the articles. It'd be something for them to see, hey, look, they're over here too. They're a little bit quiet, but they're there. But I'm sure a lot of them got immediately attacked that Luna manga just to see what it was like. And it's cool that if you read the little Luna manga too, some of the memes transferred over. You got Trollestia pulling a prank on her sister by popping the apples out of the bin. And you have that kind of, if you read the second one, it takes her down to the dungeon where she has the fake Luna robot that she was supposed to be her replacement. And that kind of odd storytelling that's not that far removed from what the fans say. So it's not that far gone. And it's kind of cool to be able to do a little bit of cultural sharing in that particular sense. It's like I said, it's our Toho. So we get to show them now.
Well, it seems that the bronies, there are a lot of bronies that just came into the fandom, not having really participated in any fandoms before this. But there are a lot that come out of, say, the furry culture, which in itself is based out of cartoons, some of it. And there are a lot of fans, I think that you're right, they're coming from that anime background. And I think there's a lot of crossover between them. If you're a fan of a show like My Little Pony, you are a fan of quality animation and storytelling. And those elements can be found within, say, the old Disney cartoons or within a lot of the anime coming out of Japan. So I think that's where you're getting that crossover.
The thing is that you also have cultures within cultures, not to get all inception-y here. But, you're talking about the furry culture. And there's a lot of geeks that, when you talk about having to mix the cultures together, there could be a lot of, not animosity, but a little bit of ickiness. Well, I want to say ickiness, but a lot of weariness of kind of being grouped in with that people. Because, say, furries watch My Little Pony, you'll get all the ones who are animation fans going, oh my, no, goodness. And you have that kind of, too, where you have... One of the neat phenomenons that I'm actually kind of looking into right now is that anime's been around in the United States for a while now. And I was there when I was younger. I watched it kind of grow. Back in the day, you actually had to trade cassette tapes in order to watch your anime. And sometimes they weren't even subtitled. And if you had the commercials, that was a bonus. Third generation copies, you could barely see it was a smudge on the screen, but man, you got your golf force though. And the thing is that now they're trying to do this with Japanese idols. And they're doing this, if you watch the Anime Expo, this is what I find it really intriguing. They're noticing that idols are being brought to the United States now, or Japanese idols are becoming popular in the United States. Mori Musume and AKB48. I mean, I saw an article the other day that actually mentioned an AK-48. It was an American article that mentioned AKB48. And I thought that was really weird that I saw that happen. And the thing is that idols come from a completely different kind of a culture. What idols are, for those who don't know, Japanese idols are kind of like your equivalent of your Disney popular kid group. So they're kids aged like 14 to 18. When they get too old, they'll take the old ones out and they'll bring new ones in and they'll kind of rotate out the cast. And the thing is that they're supposed to be marketed towards 15 to 18-year-old boys because the girls themselves are seen as some sort of pedestal. They're seen as some sort of pure kind of a girl. They don't get boyfriends. They're just there for you and they sing songs about you and love. And it's, it's kind of a cool fantasy. And that's what it is. It's basically a big fantasy that you get to have these cute little pinup girls. And the problem is that there's a periphery market, just like in My Little Pony, where the targeted demographic is not what they've wound up getting. And a lot of the idol fans are males aged 25 to 30, which could be a little creepy when you're talking about girls aged 13 to 18. So what happens then is they're seeing this phenomenon, but there's a difference in the United States. A lot of the fans in the United States are predominantly girls. And they're seeing these morning musume girls as some sort of girl empowerment thing, which is kind of funny because it's kind of the opposite. But they see them as these girls singing songs about power and such, and they kind of get a kick out of it. So now how do you have this? You have this largely male demographic on this side and this largely female demographic of the same product. Now, how do you bring that over? And how do you make it so you don't wind up with a lot of weird context? Because one of the problems with idols is that they're your friend, but they're not your friend. They're a product. And so when you go to like a meet and greet in Japan and you meet the idols, there's certain things that are kind of known. You don't ask them. You don't ask if they have a boyfriend. You don't ask them what school do they go to. You don't ask them kind of personal information because that doesn't sell the fantasy. But in America, when you bring someone here and you want to know somebody, you want to know who they are. What do they do for a job? Who are their friends? This is kind of just how we go. So you can't do that because that's not the culture that they're bred in. And so when they bring the girls over to the United States, they do something really, really cool. They make the language barrier work in their favor. They'll have the girls in the panel and they'll have the boys come up with the really attractive little girls and ask them questions. And some questions might not be appropriate. So one boy stands up in the thing in the United States, sees the girl, says, "Do you have a boyfriend?" And the translator, who happens to be like an 80-year-old Filipino woman, goes, "Why, no, I don't have a boyfriend. You want to be my boyfriend?" Trying to pick up the boy. And that way the girls don't have to listen to the question and the girls don't have to answer the question. It doesn't put them into a bad situation where they're forced to answer something they don't want to answer or that they have not been properly told how to answer. There's also other things, too, where I've seen where they brought this singing duo over to Anime Expo. And what happened is the singers went into costume. They actually dressed up as a little almost like a Hello Kitty, like Disney costume and walked around with the fans. And nobody knew it was them. So they kind of interact to see what's there while kind of keep a barrier, which is that barrier sort of assumed in Japan. But they are kind of creating the barrier here because it's what they're used to working with. The difference between the cultures, for example, in Disney, when you're an actor with Disney and you say like you're Goofy, you're an actor with Goofy, and you have to wear the Goofy suit at Disney World, and you're not allowed to take the helmet off because if you do, you break that fantasy and you can get fired for that. If you take the Mickey head off while out talking to the little kids, you can get reprimanded and possibly fired for doing that because you're breaking character. You're breaking the fantasy doing that. The Japanese idol thing is the same way, except they don't have a mask to take off. Their mask is their smile, and they can't be out of character when they're with their fans. And that's how that's supposed to work. So they can't drop their smile and say who they're dating or what have you. And it's kind of in the same realm as that, just to kind of to close up that concept there.
Well, and so I was going to say, in your article, you mentioned a couple of small examples how certain elements of the show didn't translate well over in Japan. Do you see any kind of larger barriers? And I think there's one in particular that comes to mind, but do you see any larger barriers to the show growing in popularity over in Japan because of a cultural element? And the one that's coming to mind, just so I can just quick ask you on it, was that you mentioned in the article that in Japan, shows about talking animals usually are marketed to a much younger audience.
Yeah, that's the biggest obstacle right there is the fact that they're not human. The anthropomorphic animals is kind of an American thing, and we've had it forever. I mean, we grew up with Tom and Jerry. And I have seen baseball mascots in Japan, even the animal characters in Japan, as far as mascot goes, they all have 5 fingers. I have never seen a Japanese character with less than 5 fingers, because if you have less than 5, it looks weird to them. Here we're talking about ponies, but they don't even have hands. You know what I mean?
Well, unless you look at certain comics of Lyra, but we won't get into that. We won't get into that.
I know. But the thing is that you have the idea of what constitutes as proper. If you're not a mascot or if you're not being marketed to like a little kid, it's not really, talking horses really kind of a thing. But once you look past that, and that's one of the things I've always found so real funny about it is that when My Little Pony first came out, one of the reasons why I brought that spa thing in the first place was because when I was reading the comments in 2chan, when they showed the spa scene, they were trying to figure out what the target demographic was. Because they were noticing that these were ponies and they were having full conversations with other ponies, but they weren't doing like childish things. They were just sort of doing slice of life stuff, which was a little odd in the first place. So it was kind of fun watching them sort of figure out what the target demographic was, because they have heard that grown people watch this. And then they look at the show and they go, really? And then they watch the show and they're like, I can kind of see it, but this is still weird, because they have that at the end of Dear Princess Celestia, I Learned Something Today, which is a hallmark of a children's show. And they're like, they're doing like the lesson, but yet they're kind of talking about this, and now they're in a spa, and this doesn't what kind of a thing. So that was kind of fun to watch them figure out. And it's me watching them watch us watch ponies.
Well, and you mentioned there was that one website that streams the videos, and you see the comments over the video as it's being streamed.
Yeah, that's Niconico. It's not streaming. Those are actually saved. You watch the show. How Niconico Doga works is that it looks like a live stream, but it's not. You watch the video. If you think that there's something that's funny, you pause the video, you type out your comment, you press enter, it saves that onto the screen, and you continue watching. And then the next person who watches the video gets your comment with everybody else's at that particular point. So it's fun to watch when you see, I don't know if you saw this or not, but Japanese warate means laugh. And so for them to abbreviate that, their equivalent of LOLOL is WWWWW. And so when you see something really funny happen, you see this big wave of W's go across the screen, you know that you've hit something, you know that they find something that's funny or amusing to them. And then you can see the cultural disconnect where, and there's some person in the forum in one of the comments mentioned this, and I'm going to kind of stand by it, is that when Twilight got hit by the skunk and then she's in tomatoes, there was more than one person who was wondering, why was she following some badgers and now she's taking a tomato bath? Because there was no cultural context to that. All they know is here's Spike pulling in tomato paste into a bathtub. And it just did not make any sense whatsoever. And it wasn't until you realize, and then someone in the comments in Niconico, you'll see it scroll across the screen, they'll explain, she got hit by a skunk, this is what they believe takes the stink away. And then everybody knows, and they can go on watching the cartoon. But there's little things like that are culturally goofy that won't get caught the first time around unless you do. And we do it with anime too. We'll put a little star, we'll put a subtitle or super title up that says, oh, by the way, this means this, or by the way, this is a joke for some I Am a Fish that was written by Natsume Soseki in 1884, or something like that, so that people would know, kind of get in on the joke.
You see that a lot in fan subs.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that's what a lot of questions people are asking is like, where's the Japanese dubs? No, they're not dubbing it. Takara Tomy is not. I'm looking at it, and I was looking at what Takara Tomy has as far as My Little Pony toys, and they have not really leveraged Generation 4 yet. They have like one or two things out there, maybe a coloring book, but they haven't really leveraged that cartoon in Japan yet. So the Japanese market at large simply doesn't know about the show.
Well, so then looking to the future here, what do you think the future is for My Little Pony in Japan, for the Japanese fandom? Do you see it growing? Do you see it maintaining the way it is? Or do you think that they're watching us watch the show is somewhat of an internet fad?
I think if anything, it would be awesome if they went the Powerpuff Girl route, where it became popular enough where a company decides to take a chance and sort of do something with it. Takara Tomy gets Studio Madhouse or something like that to generate their own pony show. Because then, I guess everybody would win in that particular case, kind of. You'll get like an anime pony show. I don't know. Right now, as it stands, how I see the franchise as it stands right now is that this is a guess on mine, and this is probably going to make a lot of bronies real happy, but I've noticed that the third season only has 13 episodes slated for it, which brings the total count of all the episodes up to 65. 65 episodes is a very, very magic number when it comes to television syndication. It's where they can stop the show and then sell the show to other markets as a package. Anything below 65 episodes, they won't do it. So normally you'll see animation studios, you'll see cartoon series go up to 65 episodes and then stop. And then they get syndicated to other channels where you'll see reruns again. And that's what it's looking like right now with My Little Pony. I only see the 65 episodes, and I have not heard of, no, I'm not really looking at it. I haven't heard anything past that yet. Another thing that you also might notice, and this might also bring a couple tiers too, a lot of times you'll notice that in season 1, 2, and 3 of a cartoon, it'll be quality. And then after that, season 4, 5, and 6 kind of get all meh. And that's because they commonly subcontract the franchise to another company, and they animate it differently. And I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that because of all the upswell that DHX is going to be optioned for a couple more seasons. That would be really, really cool. But I have not seen that happen a lot. So we'll have to see what happens after episode 65. If anything, maybe after It's 65 episodes. They take that package, they sell it, they get someone who can, do the cross-cultural thing and option that to Takara Tomy and say, this is what's happened. Look at the phenomenon that's going on. If we can capitalize on using our methodologies with our own animation, because like I said, I don't think they're going to be making they're not going to be dubbing it into Japanese. But if we make our own, what can we capitalize on this with? That's future thinking.
Well, so then another question I had for you, looking towards the future a bit, is do you see any brands or any cultures emerging right now that are similar to the brony phenomenon? Do you see anything in the near future that people should keep their eyes open for?
Adventure Time was one I saw. That's just more of a periphery thing. I don't know. Like I said, I think it was cool that they had an episode with Neil Patrick Harris in it. So, hey, your mileage may vary with that. Not as such. I know that there are going to be companies out there that are going to try and capitalize on it. They're going to try and see if they can duplicate this phenomenon. And I know that they're going to see, hey, why don't we make this really cool cartoon? And they'll dig back in their archives and find some silly little children's show and try and sell that to males age 25 to 30, and it'll fail. I mean, Ren and Stimpy tried it, and they failed. They tried to make an adult version of Ren and Stimpy, and that just went over like a bag of wet bricks. What made it kind of the sneaky under the radar humor was gone, and it was just a gross show after that. And so they have to be careful that other companies are going to probably try and capitalize on this. Like DC has done to an extent, giving the authors creative control over their IP. Hey, that's awesome. It's a step in the right direction. But I'm not really seeing much. I see Hasbro trying. I mean, they made that Battleship movie, so I can't give them points for not trying. But I've seen them try it with Voltron. I've seen it try to do with, they tried with Thundercats, but I bet you that was just expensive. But I got a kick out of Thundercats when that came out. But that didn't have the same appeal, though. It's really hard to say. On a marketing standpoint, if you knew it would be an instant sale, you'd be doing it all the time. But most often than not, when you make a product, you're going to be surprised when it goes viral. Yeah. It's going to be something that you thought was really cool or something that you did on a half side that sort of exploded underneath your nose and you had no idea. This happened to me. I don't know if you know this. Do you play Minecraft?
Personally, I'm just don't have the time for it, but I've seen my share of it, and we have a lot of fans who definitely play that game.
Okay, you might know me. As a lark, one weekend, I built the Enterprise D, a 1-to-1 scale model of the Enterprise D in Minecraft. And I went to bed and I woke up and Felicia Day tweeted about me. And I wound up having this video that went like 8 million views. I was just doing something for fun. And next thing you know, I got this enormous upswell just out of nowhere. I could have never predicted that. I was just goofing around making a spaceship. So who knows? Who knows? That's the thing. It's even happened to me. And I have no idea why it happened. I just thought it was cool. I showed a picture of an Enterprise and I went to bed. And that was the end of the story. So yeah, it could happen anywhere. It's just like a movie going viral. If you try, you're gonna. If you try and do it with that specific intent, you're going to fail. But I want to try my best to see if I can probably help it, going from one culture to another, and see if I can duplicate it. So I'm saying that, knowing that what I do is I try and make it not fail. But what I'm trying to do is I want to try and take what's already there, tweak it a little bit, and then push it over, because at least I have some history or I have some sort of evidence behind what makes it good, and we can then try it again somewhere else.
Well, and I think with the brony fandom, and in my personal case, I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of crossover, say, between furries or between anime fans. In my personal case, I came into the show not coming from any of those communities, and I was surprised that I became a fan. I still am surprised by it. And I think that's something that has to almost come about naturally and can't really be forced. And it seems like that's what you've been saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's even that other website that is very popular with the pony fandom, and interviewing.
You mean Equestria Daily?
Yes, I didn't know if we could brand anybody, but you.
No, we know of them.
Okay, they interviewed him, and he was like, if you would have added Seth, what's his name, the guy who actually runs the website,
Sethisto.
And they asked us, he had an interview, and he's like, if you would have asked me 1 year ago if I was running the premier My Little Pony website, I would have laughed in your face. And it's like,
Yep.
now look at me. You know what I mean? And here he is with a stoic look with a pony on his palm, and it's like, yeah, that's us. Well, that's Tara.
Well, that's Seth. Seth is a stoic man.
So yeah, I mean, that's one of the things too. I like animation. I kind of like the cultural aspect of it. That's what got me into it. I watch the shows just to see if there's anything that's cool. But I mean, how I watch My Little Pony is I actually watch the show in English when it comes out, and then what I do is I wait 3 days for it to get subbed, and then I watch it on Niconico. And I will watch their reactions to it because I make theories when I watch it in English. What will work? What won't work? What I think would be kind of neat and what I think will just they give a pass on. And I kind of go by just what they say. I have a feeling that if they're not saying anything, then nothing is happening and you're just kind of watching the show. But when Pinky sings or when, is this song bright enough that it can overcome the language barrier? And I'll look at Niconico and see what they think it is. And do they sing along? Did someone take the time to subtitle that song or make comments on it? And that way I can kind of see happens here first. That's my control. So it's an experiment. I get a control here, and then I get to watch the experiment 3 days later in Niconico. And then I kind of come up with my idea of what happened. And I made the remark that Fluttershy is best pony in Japan. And I might be wrong on that. The Hearts and Hooves, I could say that the Hearts and Hooves episode, everyone went ballistic when Shirley and Big Mac or Shirley Sensei and Anaki got together. You know what I mean? It was just one of those things where then the American fan base did it too, though. But every time Fluttershy is on, I always see it's either Fluttershy, and I see it to the less extent Rarity too. But the way that she speaks is very they captured the posh speak very, very well when I see so there's actually 2 people subtitling it. So it depends on who does the subtitling there. And you can tell who subtitles it by looking at the font. And it's interesting to see, it's like I said, it's an experiment. I'll watch it in the US. I'll see how it works in Japan. I'll browse 2chan to see if there's any comments on it, any big news, like the ponies being released, the White Celestia and the DJ being released. I'll go to Read Me Girl's diary and I'll see if they have any comments on that. The Derpy controversy, read 2channel, read Me Girls, see if there's any periphery on that comes up. So I'm always watching. I'm always I'm kind of always trying to get an edge on what's going on with that so I can better collect up info.
Well, so before we sign off here, I just wanted to quick ask you, have you seen this week's episode? And if so, what are your predictions for the Japanese fandom?
Oh, well, there's a cute Fluttershy scene at the beginning of it. Honestly, to tell you the truth, my opinion of it, I'm trying to think because keep in mind, it's been a long time since I've been in a Japanese junior high. The Fluttershy scene in the front was really cute. That was more of a visual gag. What I think might raise an eyebrow or two was when she knocked over Rainbow Dash and stomped on her chest, which I thought was a little weird. The whole teenage peer pressure thing, though, I don't think that's going to go over real well because that's kind of what the crust of the plot was Spike trying to gain acceptance and individuality. I don't know. I'm going to probably say there's probably going to be a lot of interest in the first portion of it, but the whole kind of finding out who you are kind of a thing may not work as well. But that's my theory on it. That's what I'm kind of looking for.
Well, Josh Walker is an independent cross-cultural marketing consultant and a resident expert on the Japanese fandom. Thank you for joining us today.
No problem. Thank you.